Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, we're having a special film talk about the life and work of the writer, director, and actor, Elaine May. We're Coffee with Aliens at the Movies, a film education and review channel. I'm Robert Bellissimo. I'm an actor and acting teacher.
I'm Steve Chambers. I'm a writer and actor.
And if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to our channel, which you can find in the description box below. So we have a film historian today, and also an archival producer and curator. You have so many titles, actually, Alicia. What else do you do?
So I do a lot of, if you're going to be a film historian and not teach at a university, which I have done on and off, you better be able to do a lot of other things with film.
Right,
so,
yeah.
I do a lot of copyright law and, like sourcing prints and sourcing the licensing for films, for documentaries, and for the channel I work for, which is Hollywood Suite.
Yep. Great, perfect. Yeah, so we're really looking forward to talking about Elaine May, because she's someone who there's not as much known about her as I think there should be. But Steve, you had some questions before we dived into Elaine May.
Yeah. So Alicia, just before we get to our subject, just some questions for you. In researching you, this is something interesting I find. So I did a post for our channel a few days ago, and I talked about a film, and I was like, I love this film, not just because of the content, but how I was introduced to it, which was through LWO Saturday Night at the Movies. And I read So tell me, what's your connection? Like, what happened with you and Saturday Night at the Movies? And then why film? Like, why is this your passion?
Yeah, my mom watched Saturday Night at the Movies, pretty religiously. So that was always sort of in my atmosphere. When I was super young, I remember not liking black and white, not liking film that looked, gritty, or like something like Mikey and Nikki that Elaine May directed. If that was on Saturday Night at the Movies, I'd be like, turn it off. As a child. Somewhat ironic that I would grow up and like commit my life to resurrecting films like this. But at a certain point, there was just no really other choice for me. I knew I didn't want to be in film production. I didn't have that creative side. I really enjoyed talking about film. So that led to, probably too much formal education in film, like 2 master's degrees, although one of those is a more technical degree in film preservation and restoration.
Is that at Eastman Museum in Rochester? You studied in Rochester, is this right?
Yeah. So at that time, it was a joint program with Ryerson University. So, and that's actually a program I've taught in. I've taught graduate courses in that program for many, many years, although not currently, kind of moving on to a different part of my career. But it was, I graduated with a master's degree from U of T in cinema studies in 2008, which is a terrible year to graduate, much like 2020. If we're looking at like economic downturns.
Yeah.
So, whereas like the year before me could get a BA and like easily score a job at a distributor in Canada, whether it's Warner Brothers, 2008, you had no chance of ever getting a job in film. So it took, a lot of my cohort are very noted and well-known people now in the film industry, but it took us a long time to get there. And so for me, I knew I had to combine some sort of technical hands-on part to my career to ever get a job. And that came forward in film restoration. Not to say that there's a lot of jobs in film restoration. There's like 0. Learning that kind of, learning how to source prints, how to work with museums, how to work with archives, how to speak about restoration, then led to a lot of film programming and curation, which is where I am now.
Okay, let me just ask you. So interesting. So when you were younger, Saturday Night at the Movies is on, and you're like, it's old, it's grainy, it's black, whatever. What was the switch? What was the thing? I don't know if it was gradual or quick, but what was from that to, holy shit, I'm doing this for the rest of my life?
If we're going to talk about grainy films, it was probably McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which is a Robert Altman film, where like that would typically be something that I would not be aesthetically drawn to. I remember seeing it younger, and that being sort of the turning point where, there was no one on the schoolyard to discuss McCabe and Mrs. Miller No one wanted to buy that. Like, we were all buying Spice Girls, and I was like Leonard Cohen. Like, it
Right.
really alienated me from a very young.
Sure. I think that's a similarity a lot of people I know. Yeah, like I wasn't listening to the popular stuff. Yeah.
No, and then, you know, moving to Toronto, because I'm not from here, when I was young, led me to sneak into Cinematheque Ontario screenings at the AGO, which is formerly what TIFF Bell Lightbox is now. And I think you had to be 19, and I was going at 17 or 18 to see like Silent Hitchcock and things that I was going into like sight unseen, because it was $5 if you, it was like super cheap. And it opened up my eyes to everything that, you know, so now when I program for TIFF Cinematheque, which is like very full circle for me, because that's always what I wanted. Like, I'd see Andrea Picard, who's a really incredible programmer, or, you know, someone like Bart Testa, who would eventually be my professor, like do these introductions on Max Ophuls or whoever. And I would have no idea what they were talking about, but I knew I wanted to do that.
Okay. And so to bring it to our subject, what happened with Elaine May? Like, what was your introduction to her?
She was always a name that kind of floated about. You know, prior to seeing any of her films, I think like everyone, I knew her through Ishtar, which is, I'm sure we'll discuss this soon, incredibly unjustified, and all those apocryphal stories about Ishtar, which turned out to be completely untrue, that were taken, you know, as truth. Even like the Far Side comic, that ridiculous comic of the VHS store from hell, and it's just everyone standing with a Ishtar VHS in front of them.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, even Gary Larson recently said he'd never seen the film. He rewatched it recently. Was like, "Fuck, this is really good," and felt horrible because he kind of destroyed her reputation. So I always knew her through that. And then, if I'm being perfectly honest, because I'm not sure if people from TIFF are watching this, I did not design the Elaine May retrospective that we did at TIFF 2 years ago. I was asked if I would program it, and if I would, you know, introduce it and contextualize it and kind of brand it. And at the time, I hadn't seen a single Elaine May, so I said no. And then my partner, who is the biggest fan of The Heartbreak Kid, was like, "You stupid idiot!" Like, and we sat down and we actually watched Mikey and Nikki first, which is a really weird introduction to Elaine May. And I didn't need anything else after watching Mikey and Nikki, which is her third film from 1976. It was done. Like, I was like, I don't care if the other three films are awful. I don't care if I have to dress up like Isabel and Johnny and introduce Ishtar. I will do it on the basis of Mikey and Nikki. But what I realized was there's a ton of Elaine May that I know that I didn't know were Elaine May, because she's behind so many uncredited projects. Like, okay, I grew up with Labyrinth. Well, she was a script doctor on that.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So Dustin hired her. He liked Ishtar, so he hired her a year after to work. I guess that timeline might not be right, actually, because she would have been working on the script in like 85. So who knows? But why he hired her? But you know, a lot of films, like even Heaven Can Wait, which was a film I really liked. Warren Beatty, like she was nominated for Best Screenplay for that, for an Academy Award, and won the Writers Guild of America Award for it. So like, I realized I actually knew her quite well. And we're so Arturist. All we care about is directors. And if you get away from that and realize that there's screenwriters and producers and as well as performers and actors, as you well know, that put their brand and their stamp on something and make it cohesive and whole, then you have a lot more to discover. So it was a very quick learning curve. And we did, for the retrospective too, the script doctored. We did Tootsie. We did Birdcage. I mean, Birdcage is probably my first, if I really think about it, because I saw the Birdcage when it came out when I was like 12, 13. That's probably my first Elaine May film. That was probably a lot of people of our generation's first Elaine May film.
I think me too, yeah. Birdcage was...
me too. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
It's a great script. Oh my God.
Yeah. Any idea why she's so criminally underrated?
Well, I will say, you know, 2018 summer, so just about 2 years ago, when we were doing Elaine May, I think so much has changed in the 2 years since. There's so much more what's the word I'm looking for? Just more interest in her, and I think that is through not just TIFF. A lot of places are doing Elaine May, although we were the only ones, I think, to just not just do her directorial films, but you know, partially it's, you could say this about anyone. You could say this Barbara Loden. You could say this about Dorothy Arzner. You could say this about pretty much any Ida Lupino. Like, why don't we care? Well, because white men wrote film history and programmed film history and were mostly film critics up until like what, 12 months ago. So sort of why.
That's true.
And you know, writing difficult women out of history is sort of what I focus on. I look at that process of, you know, even something like writing silent film history, like which Kevin Brown now did. Why are there so few women in those histories? Even though in the footnotes of his book, he interviewed them all, used their stories about the male directors they worked with as their, like, as a book, and then never put them in his own history. Like that's how it happens. And I don't think it's always conscious. I think even for me, like I going to school, you know, for a master's degree, 2007, 2008, there were no women in our program of study. And that's just like 13 years ago. Elaine May was not in there. Dorothy Arzner was not in there. I had to hugely specialize beyond a master's degree, and then also be faced with this challenge of not having the films available. So for something like Elaine May, I think one of the main reasons is the only film of hers that was readily available to rent or whatever, however you watch movies, was Ishtar. And if we're going to talk about The Heartbreak Kid, which is her second film from '72, it's still unavailable. Like I still can't get my head around it.
There's just a grainy version of it that you can watch for free on YouTube, but I can't find it.
Yeah, you know, and when we were programming the retro, obviously 35 millimeter was our biggest priority. And so, you know, and that was okay for A New Leaf, her first film, because no one wanted that print. So it was in great condition. It was like a projection print from 1971, because, I mean, who's doing Elaine May? No one cares. So like it looked like it had just rolled off the production line. And, you know, Mikey and Nikki, there is a stunning print, still owned by the original producer, Julian Schlossberg. That was, and that's what Criterion used for, you know, for their restoration. Oh, Heartbreak Kid. There are two prints in the world that we know of. One is at, and I hope by doing this on YouTube, someone will tell me there's another one, but there's the good print is at UCLA Film and Television Archive, and it's only travels with Elaine May in person. So obviously the invite to Elaine May was out. We now know that Stanley Donen, her partner at that time, very, very sick. Like she wasn't making any appearances. And so, you know, she never said no, but she never said yes. So we were kind of like sitting on it, and it really felt like, oh, we're going to be doing a retro without The Heartbreak Kid, which is blasphemy. Like you can't do that, because she only directed 4 films. You can't not do The Heartbreak Kid. And there's no digital copy we could show. Like TIFF does not show DVDs or Blu-rays. Like we don't do that. So in any, like it would have to be very dire. And there's no DCP, which is like the digital file. So we are very lucky. I have to thank my colleague, Sam LaFrance, who I think heard a rumor through the programmer at Anthology Film Archives in New York that there was a Swedish subtitled print in Stockholm, which was weird. I had just seen a Swedish subtitled print of Claudia Ville's Girlfriends, which is like the only print available in Portugal. So like Sweden has this cachet of rare female directors. So we flew the Swedish print in. So we watched it, and it was like, so you had, you know, it's a very Yiddish film. There's a lot of like great like Jewish idioms, and I had them translated Swedish along the bottom. So it's not, I will say it's not ideal to watch The Heartbreak Kid, but it kind of was. It was so ridiculous and so over the top and so Elaine May that we had to, like, she wouldn't answer emails, and we had to fly a print from Stockholm, but it was a great screening. So I think things like that make her underappreciated because no one can see her films. It's changing now. I mean, we launched with Mikey and Nikki, which was a brilliant move. And
I got to hear, which is the print you mentioned is unbelievable. And I think most of the other ones were pretty poor. Like the one on Canopy is pretty poor. And Steve, you have that.
I have that one. Yeah, it's not a great. Yeah, it's not wonderful.
Well, there's
Yeah.
two competing restorations. So it was restored, I won't say by who, not too long ago, and Elaine May just didn't approve of it. She said the color timing was wrong. And that's a really great lesson to anyone trying to restore a film. You need to bring your DOP if they're surviving and your director in to say that this is what it looked like. And so they had to do a second restoration. And we ended up showing the 35, an original projection print, just because we were between restorations at that time. But the one that that you have there, Robert, is yeah, it's great. And that is Elaine May approved.
Yeah. Do you?
Now, speaking of hard to find film. Oh, sorry, Robert. Go ahead.
Sorry. Do you? Before we I'd love to dive into actually the films and what they're about. A gentleman, Aaron Jones, is saying, please talk about A New Leaf. We'll get to it. So I was just curious. Before, after she broke off with Mike Nichols, do you happen to know? I know she was mainly working in theater as a playwright. Do you happen to know how those plays were doing, or what else she was working on in the '60s before A New Leaf? Is that information?
Yeah, so I mean, Mike Nichols and her, even before Mike Nichols was like directing The Graduate, he was also doing his own theater productions. So their trajectory was very parallel, even though they were separated. And she's pointed this out, that like Mike Nichols's plays were like, uproarious applause, and many of hers closed within a few days, like a few performances. I do think she was very critically acclaimed and a lot of awards her way, but in the same way that I think 1970s audiences were not really ready for female directors, I would say that, and I'm not I'm not a theater historian, but I would say that was probably true of the 1960s and female playwrights. She was doing a lot of television work though. So writing for television, appearing on television. And then by 67, she breaks out as an actress, like in feature films, with Love and Enter Laughing, which are both interesting just to watch her. Love is with Jack Lemmon, which is kind of interesting as a lead-in to A New Leaf, where you have Walter Matthau. But yeah, she was very in demand. Nichols and May broke up at the height of their fame, like the height. Like no one understood it. It's like 1959, I think. I could be wrong, but like no one. Do you know
as to why? Do you happen to know? I mean, Mike Nichols has just said, well, it was getting too hard to keep the material fresh. But is there any more to it that you happen to know?
No, and I mean, anytime we're talking, I think it's a good point to say, anytime we're talking about Elaine May and biography and timeline, everything that's out there is inaccurate or blatant lie. And when I say blatant lie, it's because Elaine May lied all the time. She wouldn't allow herself to be interviewed. She would, like the New York Times wanted to do a profile on her around 1967 for these two films. She made them allow her to interview herself under a pseudonym. So it looks like someone has interviewed her. It's like a guy's name. She's written the whole fucking thing, and like it's all lies. And for even when I was writing my program notes 2 years ago, there was a lot less accurate information out there, and I kept getting faced with like, okay, she's born in Chicago. Her parents were Yiddish vaudevillians. She grew up traveling, playing. It's all untrue. She wasn't even born in Chicago. She was born in Philadelphia. And which is why Philadelphia is in so many of her films. There's so many inside jokes on Philadelphia, even in Ishtar. And we don't really know exactly what her parents did. Her dad died when she was 12. That seems confirmed. She moved around a lot. She ended up in LA and started studying with Maria Uspensky, who's one of the preeminent acting coaches. She was married she dropped out of high school at 14, married at 16, and had her first child at 17. Which usually does not make for a successful career. No. So this is someone with a 9th grade education, formal education. There's ways to educate yourself that don't involve school, obviously, and she's highly educated. But trying to kind of piece together what her real biography is enormously hard. And the only way that I knew a lot of this was lies was really great, amazing film critic, a huge inspiration for me, Jonathan Rosenbaum. Ran into her like a couple years ago in Bologna, and I think he's very respected. So she doesn't usually talk to film critics, but she talked to him on kind of a collegial basis. And he brought up something about her childhood, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, is that what people think? Right, that makes sense because I did write that in 19. Yeah, that's all untrue." It's just like, like 2018 or 17. So because we're so lucky, she's still with us. She's 88 years old.
Yeah.
I don't think the truth will come out for a long time.
Fair enough.
I wonder why she did that. Was it just to mess with people? Did she think that, well, no one's going to print the truth anyways? Or who knows? I mean, I guess no one knows, right?
You can only like guess. If I put on my psychoanalytic hat and I'm like, put myself in her shoes, if I was a 14-year-old high school dropout with a baby at 17 and divorced by 19, I probably would lie about my origins as well when I became one of those famous people in the world.
Yeah.
I don't think people liked to hear those kinds of stories about women, even though they're very, very accurate. And that is what the life of a mid-century woman would have been. Get married, have a kid before you're ready. And then if you want a career, you're going to have to abandon your whole family and be treated horribly. She enrolled, she audited classes at the University of Chicago without having a high school diploma. And she's so much part of the student body without actually being a student, which I think is amazing. And I think much like Bob Dylan, I mean, we kind of know a lot more about Bob Dylan now, but in the 60s, he was giving so many bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, contradictory. Yeah.
It's fun. That's the thing, is she's always taking the piss out of her audience, whether you're a film critic or an interviewer or someone sitting eating popcorn at whatever movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of hard to find film, now with A New Leaf, right? So she had some 3-hour cut of that. Is that right? And then Bob Evans went, no, and then took it from her, recut it, and she tries to sue Paramount. Is this right?
Yeah, that is all fact because you get Paramount's side of it and there's legal documents too. This is not necessarily from her. She doesn't talk about it too much. This is from kind of, very solid production history side. Yeah, that's all true. It's all true. And then the judge in that case, because the lawsuit did go to trial, one of the ways he judged the case was sitting down and watching the two versions. I don't know if he watched the Elaine May version. I know he definitely watched the Paramount Robert Evans version, and he ruled against Elaine May because in his opinion that was the funniest.
This is good. Right.
And he couldn't imagine why it needed, it's like the version that I watched today is 102 minutes. A lot of people say it was 90, but I think there was some sort of compromise that happened after the lawsuit. He was just like, this is one of the greatest comedies of all time. What is Elaine May talking about? And so that's a hard thing to unpack because she is in some ways her own worst enemy. As much as I applaud all of her rock star punk as fuck, ability to just, destroy the lives of these executives who are just pulling their hair out, cursing her name. I love that. But then there are times where I'm like, I think maybe Paramount was right.
Right.
We'll never know because we don't know where that print is.
It's under her bed for sure, right? And speaking of, didn't she hide film as negotiating leverage when in editing, even with Mikey and Nikki, because that went over budget and schedule, and she's like, "Oh, you're not going to get the negative because New Leaf happened.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen."
Yeah, with A New Leaf, I think she did turn in her 3-hour print, so she doesn't have it. It would most likely be at Paramount.
Right. Okay.
Paramount, if you do a really deep dive, when I was doing research for what photographs to use for the retro and for promo, there's all these Paramount stamped film stills of A New Leaf of scenes that are not in the film. So they still went to market with all the deleted stuff. They would have used Elaine May's the set photography of scenes with the two people that the lead character Walter Matthau is supposed to murder, which is the butler and the lawyer. They went to press with that. That's in some of the posters. That's in press kits. So it's kind of weird to see that stuff because it's very much not in the film. And then Mikey and Nikki, she learned her lesson. Mikey and Nikki was filmed in 1973, so just a year after The Heartbreak Kid. And not released until 76 because of her hiding not the negative but the work print. So like what you would use to edit off of. I think, I could be wrong, but she hid that for a number of months or maybe a year until Paramount relented and allowed it out. They didn't market it. They put it in one theater, I think one theater in LA, one theater in New York for 1 week, like completely buried it in the same way that they did with her, because they were pissed at her. And so, you know,
so then, you watch, is it sort of their responsibility, not responsibility, sorry, their doing that she, or hers, that after Mikey and Nikki, she doesn't do anything till what, Ishtar, right? Like 10, 12 years later. So is that kind of both like, well, I've had it, says she, but also everyone with money in Hollywood's like, we've had it. Like, why the lapse?
Well, you know, yeah, that lapse comes up a lot. And one of the things I point out is she was still nominated for Academy Awards in that lapse. Like she switched to screenwriting. And just because, you know, we're talking about like people with money in Hollywood. Yeah, producers who have, you know, no creative vision whatsoever and are money men at Paramount. Yeah, they don't want to work with her. But someone like Warren Beatty wants to work with her. And Warren Beatty is super powerful at this time, like very powerful. And he, you know, he wasn't going to do Heaven Can Wait without Elaine May. And that's you know, the film comes out in 78. So he's probably showing her the screenplay in 76. Or like, not the screenplay, but his idea, which was originally that Muhammad Ali would be cast in the role that he eventually took as a boxer. So she, you know, it is a lapse, but it's kind of just like switching gears. And to me, like, if I put myself in her shoes, knowing what she experienced on Mikey and Nikki, I wouldn't want to direct again for a while. Like, that sounds awful. And like, she's not someone like, you have nice girls. She's not a nice girl, like in the mid-century way. Like, she told men what she thought and didn't want to work with them. Like, that would be my sense. And then the other side is, people wouldn't bankroll her projects unless she had someone like Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty behind it, who she hugely helped out in this lapse by, you know, working on the script for Tootsie. And in the case of Warren Beatty, both Heaven Can Wait and Reds. So I think even later I've never confirmed this, but I believe she script doctored Dick Tracy. So even after Ishtar, they were still working together. So I mean, there are people that know that they can rely on Elaine May to turn out an incredible performance on their part. So that's her writing the script or being a director.
Okay, well said. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Do you know why that? You know, it's interesting that in each film there were these very similar problems, either with going over budget and the shooting schedule going longer and these long editing post-production time. Do you know as to what the actual issues were? Was it a matter of they're just trying to tell her what to do? Was it a matter of like her use of improvisation, so they shot a lot more? Or was there a general sort of something that's, I know there's so much trivia on it, we can talk about it all day, but does something stand out to you the most that is sort of the essence of why this kept happening?
You know, it's really hard to say, and all I really have is sort of actors who are on, you know, on the ground kind of saying what their experience was. And there's very few actors who have negative reactions with Elaine May. But something like The Heartbreak Kid, which didn't have the same issues that A New Leaf, like Nikki and Ishtar had, like it came in on relatively on time and on budget. You know, it's written by Neil Simon, who was like the most important, you know, and it's a weird film in Neil Simon's filmography because it's one of the only films that's not based on his own play or his own story. It's him adapting it. But he demanded to be on set and supervise Elaine May, which is fucking bullshit. If you think about it, like, this man's not the director. And he had a clause in his contract saying she was not allowed to change any of the dialogue or any of his statements. She had to direct it like, and this is someone who, as much as we talk about A New Leaf being financially kind of a disaster, it did really well at the box office. You know, like, no one knew that when A New Leaf came out. It wasn't like Ishtar where you had People magazine like breaking her over the coals. People loved A New Leaf. So she had earned her cred for Heartbreak Kid. And here you have Neil Simon, who I love, whatever, but like total dick. But just like on set, like demanding that she not change any nuance. And he did watch her direct for, I think it was 2 weeks, Charles. This all comes from Charles Grodin in his autobiography. And
I read that.
he realized that he's like way better than him. He just like walked off set. So if I had to guess, I would say she had to deal with stuff like that as a woman all the time, like all the time, those microaggressions and these like little like controlling, not even little, like very major moves and trying to control her, despite her having earned the credit that she should be able to direct any way she wants. I think that spins out of control. And she, again, putting on psychoanalytic cat, if I were her, which I'm not, if you have only experienced that where men are telling you what to do and not trusting you, even though you constantly proved yourself, you start getting a lot more controlling and you start getting a lot more like clapping back. And definitely Mikey and Nikki is a scary scenario where she filmed more footage than Gone with the Wind, like 3 times as much footage as Gone with the Wind.
Wow.
Right.
In terms of meters, and film stock's expensive. This is not like digital, as you know.
Right.
Like, it costs money. Like they would calculate it by the inch. And she would leave the cameras on when the actors didn't know they were on camera because she was hoping to kind of get an intimate moment or something that she could use. Now, that's not how you direct a film. We know that. For a studio, like Barbara Loden can do that in 1970.
Right.
But Elaine May can't do that on Paramount's dime in 1973. It comes out in 76, but it's 73. So I get both sides, and but I also get where she's probably coming from, where she is just sick of this shit.
Just a note on Heartbreak Kid. Didn't she say to Neil Simon, "Okay, I'll shoot your script, but then I'm going to shoot my own improv, and then we'll decide what's better"? So
yeah, she did. You're right. Thank you for that. She did simultaneously, and his stuff was dry and didn't work at all. And as we know, like I'm a giant Charles Grodin fan. He's really good at improvising, and I think a lot of those moments in Heartbreak Kid are improvised. With Elaine May being the master, she's the master of improvisation. That's how she was. So I mean, it's hard to go from being world-renowned as an improvisation artist to then having to work off a script as a director. I think that's probably a very difficult transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wonder what Neil Simon later on, like when she said to him, "Well, I'm going to shoot improvs, and then we'll decide later with your scenes that we don't change any words." I wonder what he felt about that. I guess no one really knows what came on set and what didn't, what was in the script. I would love to know. I wish there was more info on that.
I mean, I feel like there's a way to go about that. You could go to the UCLA Film and Television Archive and look at the shooting script, and you could, grab. Those are things at the Margaret Herrick Library, where if you are, a reasonably accredited researcher, like you two would be fine. Your actors, like they won't let a 14-year-old. Well, they might let a 14-year-old high school kid. But you'd probably be like looking at a digital copy of it, but you could actually do that comparison. It's just that no one has bothered because we're still I don't know why I'm using the word we're still working on Elaine May in some ways.
Right.
No,
I
think that's true.
Yeah, we're still trying to find out so much that's not known. It's funny because we talk about the conflicts with Paramount, but as you mentioned, Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty admired her and felt that they owed her for Heaven Can Wait and Tootsie. I mean, Tootsie, Steve and I reviewed Tootsie, and Tootsie wouldn't be half of what it was without what she came up with and wrote in the script. I think it's criminal that she didn't get a co-writing credit on that. But then there were issues even between the three of them. Do you know as to what that was? I know that Warren Beatty and her didn't even talk for a couple of years, and I mean, how could she have had issues with them? Is what I'm, curious. I don't know if you know anything about that, but
I think it's very, of all the films that you presented in that retro, Tootsie was actually hard to talk about because Dustin Hoffman's scandal had come out like 2 weeks prior. That was awful.
Right.
But,
oh, right.
But I would actually say Ishtar was the hardest And because there's just so much out there that's untrue, including sort of, and Dustin Hoffman, more so Warren Beatty, have more recently discussed Ishtar and been like, a lot of this is exaggerated. Yes, there was director conflict, but I mean, what film doesn't have that? This really was an opportunity for Paramount to put the nail in the coffin and bury Elaine May before the film even was finished. They were, putting out publicity that was saying it was over budget, which it was, but a lot of films go over budget. Like, this is not unusual. And when you design a film that's going to be, filmed in Morocco, it's probably going to go over budget during a time where there was a lot of Middle East and Northern African conflict from country to country. So that actually is a huge reason why it went over budget, is because their travel plans would all change based on who was at war with who. That's not her fault. And so it's really hard to talk about Ishtar because I think we don't know the truth. And she's been I love, there's a quote that she has. It's like, if everyone who hates Ishtar had actually seen it, she'd be a rich woman. I think she probably
I saw that, yeah.
That's her and Mike Nichols talking.
Mike Nichols.
Saying that.
Yeah, in 2006, we did a great conversation. And definitely in 2006, people weren't reassessing Ishtar the way they are now. And I watched, I'll get to my thoughts on Ishtar. I watched it last night again. But I think people love to hate. People love to be haters. Like, Ishtar was
recreational rage
were easy targets. And but the thing is like, sure, there's probably conflicts. Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty were divas in 1986 when this was being filmed. Like, total divas. Come on, maybe it was filmed in 85. Like, they were A-listers, and it's funny because here's this film where she's taking. I mean, Dustin Hoffman, I get. Like, I always thought Tootsie was weird because it's like you're making Dustin Hoffman into a sex object. Like, that's so weird. But with Warren Beatty, I'm like, she just takes these men and makes them the stupidest, most like ridiculous characters. And I think there's a lot on Hoffman and Beatty's part that they're willing to do that. And you see the Religion Heaven Can Wait. Like, he's a goofy guy, and Elaine May. She writes stupid men so well. Like, no one can make men look more stupid or pointless than Elaine May. But Ishtar's really good. Yeah. Like, whenever I talk to people at Ishtar, like, they all have this preconceived notion of what it is, and it's terrible. And when I ask, have you ever seen it? They're like, no.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's so weird. Yeah. Like, I don't know if it is coming back to that Far Side comic that we grew up with, or if it's just like it was made fun of so much in the media, like on talk shows and things like that. It became the butt of every joke. And no one, I mean, the thing is, it lost money theatrically, but it did very well on the home media market. So, like, it wasn't as big of a financial disaster as we say it was, if you do the math.
Well, that's interesting right there, right?
Well, it was #1, right, for the first week.
They watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was #1 at the box office for a full week. And then the only film that toppled it was Beverly Hills Cop 2. I mean, of course it would. Like, that was one
part 2.
Yeah. Usually anticipated sequel to a major blockbuster. So, like, of course it's going to follow the box office. I think it went from 1 to 4. But it's also going to happen when your own studio puts out bad reviews of a film.
Right. Well, yeah, I watched it again the other night myself, and I like the second half, but I love the first half. I think all those scenes are so brilliant, and I'm thinking, I mean, come on, there are way worse movies. Not that this is a bad movie, but the fact that I think even Dustin Hoffman every now and then would say he regretted it, and then say he didn't, and backwards and forwards. But I don't understand this. To get these big stars to be that goofy and not only goofy, but like naturally goofy, like to get those sides out of them. Steve and I talked about that with Dustin. If you watch him in Lenny, he clearly has that, and interviews too. And Warren Beatty, they're hilarious, right? So, I mean, this is a treasure to see these guys as these struggling lounge singers. I don't really get it, but
first 30 minutes are a perfect film.
Oh yeah.
And I think the last 20 minutes are perfect. There's just a middle, and a lot of films have it. There's just a middle part that
Yeah.
That's why it's so weird, because you go from like a great New York film to Morocco.
Yeah.
Super weird.
Yeah.
You know, she's really, her whole film career is really working in resurrecting these former genres from like Hollywood's golden age. So like A New Leaf is very screwball comedy from the 30s, like Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. And then you have, you know, Heartbreak Kid, it's kind of similar. And then you have, you know, Ishtar is like very Bing Crosby.
It's a road,
right.
Yeah, it's a road
movie.
The road
Throwback
to Singapore.
I think in 1987 when it came out, people knew that because those films were still on TV and people knew, you know, Bob Hope films and things like that. But like, we don't have that reference in 2020. We don't watch these films knowing that it's like the jokes and the way it's structured is how those films from the 1940s were structured. And even something like Heaven Can Wait is, you know, it's a remake of a film from the 40s. And it's like, she's really good at that. And I think it kind of fell apart in 1987 because 87 in terms of film is like a weird time where people only cared about like product placement and corporatization. Like at that point, I think I could be wrong, Paramount's owned by Coca-Cola. Like it's a different time. And I think of all her films, like Ishtar's the revelation. If you're in Canada, which I'm assuming most of our viewers are, it is streaming for free on CTV's app. You just have to watch so many oatmeal commercials. Like you're gonna watch like 14.
It's all oatmeal. Yeah.
But it's okay because it's Ishtar, and it's kind of funny when it's all of a sudden punctuated with like a weird commercial. But yeah, watch it because, or even go on YouTube. The songs. The songs are written. Because of course Dustin Hoffman.
The songs stuck in my head, even the ones they came
up. It's so good. Like they're written by Elaine May with Paul Williams, who wrote for the Muppet Show and did Paradise, like one of the greatest songwriters of all time. Like he wrote Rainbow. And it's them writing the lyrics to these two failed kind of like cabaret act, you know, singers. Like sort of if the Olive Garden hired a pianist, it would be one of these guys. And these songs are so hilarious. They're all being improvised. Like they're performed as though they haven't written a song at all, and they're just spitting out weird dialogue. And it's
oh, it's incredible. I mean, I you know, part of me thought, are they just coming up with this? But then I'm thinking, no, they couldn't have, like, because they are like the songs are not that bad. You know, they're catchy. So
and there's some good covers. Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman trying to do covers of really famous songs is pretty good. The soundtrack's really rare. Like if you can find the soundtrack, which I would encourage everyone to, it's actually.
I was just gonna say,
it's a great
soundtrack. I'd love to go into something we've touched on, which is the males that she's. You know, all her films are about men, but. You know, was she, I don't think she was out to strictly satire men, because I never feel that I never, as much as bad as they may be acting in a lot of ways, you never hate them, at least I don't, but she seemed to humanize them at the same time. And I'm like, I don't know how she did that. Do you know how? You know, do you? I don't know if you really could answer that, but was she out? Do you think she was out to just satirize these, or was it really to humanize and show what she knows? You know, she knew guys like this in Philadelphia, from what I've read. What do you think?
You know, I think a lot of the frustrations with Elaine May that were kind of being written about as these films came out were from a point of view that women directors should direct films about women, and those films about women should talk about the social issues that affect women. And she doesn't do that. But to me, she's not necessarily satirizing different genders. She's satirizing relationships. So like when she did that, that's what Nichols and May did, was, you know, satirizing marriage, which you see in A New Leaf and The Heartbreak Kid, and satirizing sexual relationships, and satirizing, you know, whatever. Like, so when, her male characters are, even like the ones that are awful, are super likable in some ways. Or like Mikey and Nikki's a great example. Like these are two very disturbed men. They've known each other since they were kids, and one of them is in charge of trying to off the other one. And so you can imagine the tension. And of course, that's John Cassavetes and Peter Falk, like the two greatest actors of all time.
Right.
I always say like Mikey and Nikki is more Cassavetes than Cassavetes in some way.
I get that, man. I saw that when I was really young, and I didn't get. Yeah, I thought that was a John Cassavetes film. It felt like that.
It looks like it.
Years later, and it looks like
it does.
I think, you know, one of the ways I kind of think about it is I think she directs men, or she writes her male characters as a vision of how women see them, which sounds really so the buffoonery in a comedy is kind of funny, you know, but when you take something like Mikey and Nikki, who are, you know, there's a lot of scenes of abuse of women in that film. She really is looking at, not necessarily like this is, you know, she's focusing more on her male characters as a lens for how women see them. That's how I read it. I think a lot of people would probably disagree or maybe agree. I don't know.
Oh, but, that's interesting. Okay.
I know. I think so. Yeah, I think so, definitely. And at the same time, like you said, she I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just a matter of, you know, the 70s is very much like, this is what it is. This is what I see. So the fact that you still kind of like these guys in a way and that they make you laugh, it's amazing to me. I mean, Nikki as Cassavetes has a line. I forget it was Martin Landau's wife. He goes back, and then when they both are smacking each other, and then he sits on the bed, and I never picked up on the line he says, which is, "What is wrong with me?" You know, and I thought, oh, I don't know, Steve, if you ever heard that either, but there are these little, it's so detailed that it just makes me wonder if she had an intention with showing not just buffoonery, but complexity and that they're human, right? They're assholes, but you kind of love them in a way.
I mean, I think she did, for me, like she did that thing, and I'm not the first one to say this, that she didn't. And I think it's a hard thing for a filmmaker to do. And we've talked about this with like Mike Lee, but she didn't judge her characters no matter like how, like you said, like Mikey and Nikki, like these guys are fucking not great guys. But if you kind of shut your mind off and watch it, you're with them, like, okay. And I'm not saying she makes them likable, but she's also not dictating to the audience, like, this is what you should think. Like, these are bad guys. And so maybe little moments like Falk kind of, what is wrong with me? Yeah, I don't know if he made that up or whatever, but I feel like a big thing with her was she didn't, like, I wanted to hate, I don't know hate, but like Charles Grodin in The Heartbreak Kid. I'm like, oh God, but I don't want to be you, but you're interesting.
But I mean, the only way a film like that works is if your characters are relatable. And as much as like, I mean, I rewatched Heartbreak Kid on probably the same terrible YouTube link recently, and you know, it's cringe. Like it's like I remember him though, because Jeannie Berlin, who is of course Elaine May's daughter, who he's, you know, the story is that he's on his honeymoon and he falls in love with someone else after being married for like 5 days. He's got to break it off with Jeannie Berlin. I mean, I get where he's coming from because she is insufferable. And
it's so well done. It's the egg salad, man.
God. It's not just the egg salad. So she orders a double egg salad at a diner, and then with a double chocolate shake. And at a certain point, it's just like, and then she has it all over her face. It was a lot of things.
And his face, he's wonderful. Just
I mean, that we're making, like, she's able to make us, regardless of if you're a woman or whatever, however you identify, she makes us relate to Charles Grodin's character very early on. Disgusted by his behavior and his eventual downfall, which isn't really a spoiler. It's not really a downfall. It's a metaphorical downfall. It is all, the payoff is so great. And something like A New Leaf, like, which I know we didn't get too much into, so maybe now is a good time, but like that's her math character. He's 50 years old when he films this, playing like a young bachelor, which is ridiculous to me.
Well, she wanted Christopher Plummer, I believe. I think that was,
Plummer, who was slightly younger, I guess, but
well, I guess he was kind of he was in his 40s by then.
He wanted like an older, aristocratic-looking man, and you know, A New Leaf is so funny and so good, and of course she stars in it too. And character of Henrietta Lowell is perfection. Like it's comic perfection. I love it so I love it so much, but like making you empathize with a potential murderer is a hard thing to do, but she does it because I mean it's a similar character to her daughter playing in a Heartbreak Kid, where there's but she's much sweeter in A New Leaf. Like she's covered in crime all the time, and she drops everything. She's the most awkward woman. Yeah. You just love her so much, and
she's so adorable, right? Like I'm kind of like, why don't you love her? What's wrong with you?
And like you kind of get where Walter Matthau's coming from, because in the very beginning there's a great monologue where he discovers he's a trust fund kid. He's realized that all his money's run out and he's poor. So like he was really rich, like driving a Ferrari and belonging to the most elite clubs, and he just walks around New York to all his former haunts chanting "I'm poor" and saying goodbye to like all of his things. And God, it's good. It's so good because most people watching it are not rich. We're probably poor in his eyes, but we are empathizing with him over something that we've never had and the idea of losing it, which I think is amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're right. It's exactly that. That's another one it's not hard to find. I think you can rent it off YouTube, A New Leaf. I saw it, I think like an old VHS copy a long time ago. I can't even remember. But I think A New Leaf, I forgot about that one. That's amazing. Let me ask you, Alicia, if you had to pick out of the four, is it 4 films? 5 films? 4 films? 5.
4.
1, 2, 3, 4. What's do you have a favorite?
I think it's really hard for me because like it's almost because there's so few of them, it's harder than if like she had a 30 filmography. It's probably Heartbreak Kid. I mean, it's just
so good.
Even for its like relative unavailability, so it's a little bit more like fetishized because it's just so hard to see. And I think about that Swedish screening all the time and wish that, I just wish another print would come up so that we could show it at the Royal in Toronto, which if that ever happens again, like if I program at the Review in the Royal, and like it's a dark time for all of us right now.
You do silent review at the Review, right? Silent films, and then is it Ladies of Burlesque at the Royal?
Yeah, and so for my fifth anniversary is coming up for Ladies of Burlesque in January, and my plan was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of A New Leaf with the print from Paramount, and I don't know if that's going to happen in January.
Yes.
They've been planning for like a year. Like I could have done it last year, but I was like, no, it's 1971, and that'll be the 50th anniversary of the film, and then 5 years I've been doing Ladies of Burlesque. That's just save it, and now I'm like,
perfect.
I should have just done it. And my partner,
I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. My partner Brendan Ross has shown Mikey and Nikki pretty recently before the shutdown. I
remember that. Yeah. I remember that.
We've been doing the Elaine May as much as possible. But I think Heartbreak Kid. It's hard to pick a favorite. There's no bad egg in the bunch. Even I don't know what that phrase is, but even Ishtar. Like I really enjoyed watching it last night. I couldn't believe all the nuances.
Me too.
It's really meant to be seen on the big screen. Seeing on the big screen TIFF was really, because it's Vittorio Sitara. Like it's like incredible cinematography. Really in these like desert landscapes are meant to be seen big. So it's kind of a disservice that it became a VHS favorite and on TV, because it's not how she meant it to be seen. But like A New Leaf, you're right, it's on Blu-ray. So Paramount did restore it and did a reasonable digital restoration, and it looks really good. So that one is luckily available. So I would say if you're going to start, I would actually start with A New Leaf and not The Heartbreak Kid, because The Heartbreak Kid within the first 30 seconds is like cringe inducing.
It's hard to watch.
The best way possible, but like go in, like dip your toe into the cold water and then submerge. Like don't dive in to Heartbreak Kid. I would start with A New Leaf.
I agree with you. Well said.
Yeah, I agree.
I just wrote a thing about The Heartbreak Kid today for our page, and I think, and I didn't realize I was just writing, and as I was doing it, I'm like, I think this started like a film genre, like that cringe sort of. I think the Farrelly brothers took it, like, but I feel like everything started with The Heartbreak Kid. The for a feature film the whole time. Just
Well, the comedy comes from the situations, right? And I think even Jerry Seinfeld said it's his favorite comedy, and you can even see the influence in Seinfeld, right? He's not going for a one-liner. It's the situations that are so embarrassing. Like, I was gonna watch it last night, and I've seen it. I watch it about once a year, and I was like, oh, I just can't always bring myself to do it because it's so embarrassing. It's so cringeworthy to see this guy, and it even says a lot about men in general. Sometimes when you fall for a woman just purely based on looks, and then by the time he marries her, he doesn't even know who she is.
Really, I'll tell you one thing. I think we know who she is, and this is, of course, a character played by Sybil Shepherd. Super empty and vapid would be my He's got for him. I think that's a good way. I mean, I do think if ever there's a film that should be like a sponsorship with sunscreen, it could be The Heartbreak Kid.
That's good.
Every time I sunburn, I am really careful. Like, I'm, as you can see, exceptionally pale. So like, I coat myself in the sunscreen. I think mostly because of The Heartbreak Kid. Because when I have been sunburned in the past, I just think I'm Leela, and it's like the most wretchedness, like just supreme wretchedness, where she's so sunburned and just covered in cream.
Oh God!
Mark and Gary podcast had Martin Short on it a few weeks ago. If you are looking for a podcast, it's a brilliant episode, and they talked about their favorite comedy, and much like Jerry Seinfeld, Heartbreak Kid was like hands down. And Mark Maron was like, why can't we see this? Why is this not available? Why? And so I would say we know why it's not available. They have no print source to actually restore. So I don't know. I would plead with Paramount or Criterion. I'm sure Criterion's tried.
Criterion, I would imagine, would be the one to hopefully get it done one day.
Yeah.
One thing that I really stood out to me that is particularly a new lead and The Heartbreak Kid is this element of performing. Like, the men are always performing and conning, and I thought, geez, she'd be perfect to do the biographical film on Donald Trump. Just the perfect, like this great, the con men. Like not that maybe that's something she'd want to do, right? But just that element of the con man and the person always performing, and I wonder if that was intentional.
I don't know.
Like, they're always lying. They're really quick. They're improvising and finding ways to convince people of what's going on. Less so in the other films, the Becky, Nikki, and Ishtar, but in the first two, there's this element of that. I don't know if that's something that stood out to you before, Alicia.
I think they're always lying to themselves, and that includes they're performing to themselves. Like, that includes Mikey and Nikki, and like, we know masculinity is performative, right? So like, she knew that in 1971 before all of us were talking about it, that, masculinity as is femininity or whatever in between. So I don't know. That sounds like a good reading to me.
Yeah. No, that's pretty good.
It really stood out to me.
I don't know, Robert, if you have any other questions.
I do. I have 3 minutes before I have to go.
Yeah, you have 3 minutes. You got anything?
No, I know you wanted to mention your podcast, Alicia. You mentioned a podcast you're starting.
Yeah, it's through A Year in Film. It's coming, which is Hollywood Suite's original content. We have a show that we do every year that takes 1 year in history and film history and deep dives into it. So looks at critical assessments of the popular films, and then also what were the hidden gems that you haven't heard of. So we're working on, I don't have a date for it yet, but I would say, so there's going to be an accompanying podcast, but also if you want to watch the show, you can do that on Hollywood Suite's website for free. And so like, our second season premieres in December, but the first season is up there, and Heaven Can Wait's in there, and a few others. Like, we do 1970, 1983, 1992, and 2007. So, and it's a lot of film interviews with film critics, including myself, and a lot of archival interviews of actors talking about their films in 1978, and
Great. I'll get the links and I'll put them in the description box for other people to check out. Sorry, Steve, did you have one last thing before Alicia goes?
No, thank you for your time, and that was
thank you
so much. And just, I know we have like 30 seconds. Just one thing.
I can flex within a minute, though, so don't worry.
Okay, I was gonna rush through it. There is a book on. I don't know if you know this, Alicia. The Making of Mike Nichols that came out last year. Aren't you gonna die someday?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I've seen that kind of bandied about, but I didn't realize it had come out. So that's really excellent.
Yes, and I just wanted to. I spoke to the author. He's a kind man, and a lot of things you're saying he mentions in the book. So it's a real deep dive into the making of Mikey and Nikki that you can't find on the internet. You got to get the book, and his name's Patrick Cooper.
Cool.
So this is a really good book, and of course to get the criterion of Mikey and Nikki and our friends at Unobstructed View in Toronto, you can order it from them, and I'll link that in the description box. But that's, someone's asking, so I have this shirt here, and I know that Alicia has it as well, this is a TN scene, I believe they were called. Is that where you got yours, Alicia?
Yeah, it's the only place you can get it. I think
so, yeah.
Yeah. Instagram, and they have a bunch of really great t-shirts all designed around women, not just directors, but also cinematographers, screenwriters, that kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
Right. And I'll leave the link for where you can get that below. Well, thank you so much. This was
thank you.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, learned a lot. And there's Robert Funado saying he's going to read that book. He was our guest last week.
Nice.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah. Okay. Well, and for those of you watching, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to our channel. We do a live interview every week with a guest. Next week, we have John A. Gallagher, a New York filmmaker. And a couple of days later, we're doing Halloween with Vanessa Bituno, who's a film blogger. We're going to talk about Halloween movies now that we're in October. So hit subscribe, and we do 3 other videos of reviews that we post during the week. And we'll see you next time. All right. Well, thanks so much again.
Yeah.
Thanks, See ya.
Are you still? Oh. Are you still there, Steve? Sorry. If you're just, oh no, I don't know why it's blank. Anyways.